The energy transition is the global movement to try to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that we're putting into the atmosphere. So, we have had a decade of growth and employment in the refining and petrochemical sectors here in Louisiana. And what makes it unique is that these are very energy intensive sectors and also very emissions intensive sectors, but we're selling these products onto a global market. And so, what companies will tell us is that as they're selling these products that are emissions intensive onto this global market, their customers and their investors are asking them, number one, what is the emissions intensity of these products? And number two, to compare our emissions intensity to emissions intensity of other parts of the world. And so as a state that has a lot of employment in these sectors, that has seen billions and billions of dollars of investment in these sectors over the past decade, it's really important that we understand what our customers and what our investors are telling us so that we can remain to be competitive into the future. So we can kind of think about two different roads perhaps we could take here in Louisiana. The first road is you could really invest very, very, very heavily into decarbonization or reductions in emissions. And if we invest too heavily in emissions reductions and we spend a whole lot of resources doing that, perhaps our products will no longer be competitive economically on that global market. The other approach we might take is kind of the ostrich putting its head in the sand, so to speak. And in that scenario, perhaps we just ignore these calls for decarbonization. Perhaps in 5-10 years from now, we find that we're not competitive in that global marketplace, not because of the cost of our products, but because of the emissions intensity. And so there's a real risk for us as we try to balance, okay, how am I able to reduce these emissions while still staying economically competitive? And so what we have here in Louisiana is the confluence of really three factors that are driving companies to invest in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. The first factor is we have these industrial sources of emissions for which we have access to that we can capture. The second reason is that we have this geology that is conducive to storing this carbon permanently underground. And then the third factor, of course, as I mentioned, is the global call to reduce these emissions. So one of the perhaps most economic means of achieving large-scale, meaningful reductions in emissions over the next decade or so is carbon capture, utilization, and storage. If we're going to reduce global emissions, we have to really take a global approach.